they're not calculating into the equation the effects of lockdown, isolation, masks, school closes, economic effects, and so on, which I think we're years away from knowing what the full effects will be. So far, it looks like it has damaged our economy and other things. School kids are behind, and social attitudes about youngsters and how they interact with each other. There's some studies coming out now showing, these kids just coming into college now. I have freshmen myself. They're very different than they were a few years ago. It's hard to say what the cause is, but social isolation during COVID might be one.
You mentioned science before, and as a man of science and a man who likes facts, having been through 2 years of COVID, and you are in California, which I fled because of COVID and lockdowns and masks and injections, mandated injections, all of these things that I felt had nothing to do with science, and I think or virtually nothing to do with science or a abuse of science, let's say. How shaky do you think the scientific world is right now? I mean, Fauci just in the last couple of days saying, "Oh, I was never for lockdowns," and then it's like we're playing videos on the show where he's calling for lockdowns a year ago. And remember when he said, "When you criticize me, I am the science. You're criticizing science."
Yeah, so it's been a problem for the reputation of science, I guess, because the CDC says one thing and then changes its mind, or Fauci says, no mask, then mask, then no mask. But in a way, okay, let's just step aside from particular individuals like Fauci and just say in general, if you don't know what's going on, and we didn't, what was this, January 2020 to March is when we were kind of realizing, okay, there's something big happening here. What is it? And it took a long time to figure out what's the right thing to do. There's so much uncertainty and so much unpredictability in complex systems like the human body of, why do some people who get the virus who double vax boosted, they lead clean, healthy lives, they're isolated, masked, and they get it anyway. And I know people that didn't do anything. They didn't change their life at all, never wore a mask, and they get it, nothing happens, right? So it's like, okay, because there's variation, the body's a complex system and people respond differently. And so these are on average recommendations. And I try to be sympathetic by putting myself in somebody. If I was a public policy person, if I was the head of a health institute, or I was the mayor of the city of LA, say, or governor of California, and they stick a microphone in your face and go, okay, what do we do? So here you have kind of a type 1, type 2 error problem, signal detection problem. If I say business as usual, and it turns out it's like Ebola or AIDS, remember AIDS was 100% fatal at first. What if it turns out like that, and I really screwed up and it's on me? So they're more likely to err on the other side. Like let's err on the side of making a type 1 error. Assume it's going to be terrible. And if it isn't, well, we got lucky. Of course, they're not calculating into the equation the effects of lockdown, isolation, masks, school closes, economic effects, and so on, which I think we're years away from knowing what the full effects will be. So far, it looks like it has damaged our economy and other things. School kids are behind, and social attitudes about youngsters and how they interact with each other. There's some studies coming out now showing, these kids just coming into college now. I have freshmen myself. They're very different than they were a few years ago. It's hard to say what the cause is, but social isolation during COVID might be one. Anyway, those are the kinds.
Wait, I'm curious though. How are you seeing that manifested in your students now from say 5 years ago?
Super quiet, very, very reticent to say anything. There may be some cancel culture effects there. People, because I bring up abortion, like we just did an issue on abortion. So, pro-life, pro-choice. All right, kids, let's talk about it. And they're like, hey,
wow.
They're afraid to say anything. It's like, how can you not have an opinion on abortion?
And you're at Chapman, which is a great defender of free speech. I mean, one of the few universities that is.
Yeah, so here this is reflecting more of a bottom-up kind of cultural shift, I think. Maybe they're just shy, I don't know. But, yesterday one of my student TED Talks was on attractiveness, lookism. Why is it that good-looking people get more benefits than others? Like, all right, you got to have an opinion on this, right? Here's Brad Pitt. That's so unfair. What are you going to do about Brad Pitt? And they're looking around like, I don't want to say anything. I'm like, oh, come on, man. So it could be some of that. We do know there's an uptick in depression and cutting, suicidal ideation, particularly amongst girls. Is it social media? Is it Facebook? Is it social isolation during COVID? There's different factors we don't know yet, but there are some effects to that.
I'm curious, how much of this, say, related to COVID was people that maybe weren't qualified or in some ways were overqualified to giving information. So an example I would use is right when the pandemic happened, I had a bunch of experts on, people that are fairly well known, and they were talking about how to wash your bags when you leave the grocery store and perfectly, put your mask on this way, and talking about social distancing, a phrase that no one had really uttered before, and all of these strange things, and lockdowns, which really had never been done before at scale and were based on basically some wonky paper that never meant anything. But everyone just started saying the same thing. Then when we find out it doesn't work, everyone just looks at the expert class and goes, and I'm not talking about the Faucis or even the CDCs, I'm just talking about the general people who are the tastemakers. Everyone just looks at them and is like, you guys just screwed us all terribly.
Right. So whenever there's uncertainty about the cause of something, let's say autism, one reason vaccines got associated with autism is because we don't know the cause of autism. We still don't. There's probably multiple causes, some genetic predispositions, who knows, in the womb chemistry, I don't know. We don't know. But so then anything that's even loosely associated then gets affiliated as a causal vector. And I think we see a lot of that in pandemics like this where you just don't know. Remember when AIDS first came online, I mean, there was like panic. Oh, you shouldn't go in the swimming pool. I remember when Greg Louganis cut his head on the diving board and Barbara Walters was doing this private one-on-one interview with him, and he talked about this. She's, oh my God, Greg, you went in the pool? Right. Because at the time, it's like, it could spread through water, the air. Don't get on a bus with an AIDS patient. It's a gay disease. All this crazy stuff. There was conspiracy theories about it. The black community, that the CIA was up to something with AIDS. And, but these are not completely crazy. This is under my rubric of constructive conspiracism. Yeah. Because the Tuskegee experiments where they, withheld treatments to African Americans with syphilis, and other shenanigans that the CIA and the FBI have done to infiltrate black activist groups, to blackmail Martin Luther King Jr. and threaten if he doesn't kill himself, they're going to expose. They made sex tapes of him in hotel rooms with women and said, we're going to play these publicly if you don't kill yourself. This is our government did this. So it's not completely crazy for people who, I don't trust the government. It's like, yeah, okay, I understand.
So in essence, by the end of reading this, most people will be a little more libertarian, perhaps. Because you do go into several other examples of that, about how governments have been doing this.
Oh, yes, right. MK Ultra, CIA dosing U.S. citizens with LSD just to see what would happen. They actually set up in brothels. They had these Johns coming and they would dose them with LSD and then film them having sex with prostitutes. Let's see what happens here, right? It was all under this kind of larger plan that, you remember the missile gap. Well, this was the mind control gap. The Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans are ahead of us on mind control drugs. So we got to do experiments on this. So again, no congressional approval. People didn't know about it. President didn't even know about it. This is just like rogue factions in the security state doing this. So when people talk about the deep state, there's people behind the scenes doing things. Well, historically, that has happened, right? That's just MK Ultra. That's just one.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about academia instead of nonstop yelling, check out our academia playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, check out our full episode playlist. They're all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.